chest pain, increased heart rate, sweating, trembling, and nausea. I felt all of them, especially right after a few specific situations. Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos and maximize profits. I'm going to talk about those specific situations that cause those symptoms in just a few minutes. And if you want a tool that you can use to drive your cash flow, then be sure to listen to the end of this podcast. But let me ask you a couple of questions. If you're a construction business owner or thinking about starting a business, or you're in charge of the financial side of a construction business, are you worried that your construction business's financial health is bad, but you don't really know? Have you ever wanted to have more confidence in the financial side of your construction business? Are you tired of not knowing your numbers? Do any of these following statements sound familiar that I've heard from a lot of construction business owners that I've surveyed? They say things like, I'm doing well in my jobs, but I'm losing money. Where's the problem? Another person said, I feel the money just comes into my bank account and then goes out even faster. There doesn't seem to be much left over, and I really don't understand why. Another question was, how do we know we are managing our finances correctly? When it comes to cash flow, how do you predict your cash flow at least a few months, maybe even just a month into the future? A question that a lot of people ask, if they're being honest, is, am I the only one who's struggling to get my arms around the financial side of the business? Another person said, I need to hire, but I don't know if I can afford to. Look, if you're like a lot of construction business owners and leaders, you're probably strong in the construction and the operations side of the business, or maybe sales and business development are in your wheelhouse. But when it comes to the financial side, you have questions like, what's the story that your financial reports are telling you? How do you get the financial side of the business set up right? How do you get this foundation set up right? And then how do you understand what your financial reports are telling you so you can use that information to, quote, steer the ship? How can you predict cash flow at least a few months in the future? Is it even possible? The reality is that the lack of confidence in your financial reporting, or in some cases the complete lack of financial reporting, makes it difficult or even impossible to make crucial decisions about your business. Instead of making strategic decisions, you probably feel like you're just gambling or taking a shot in the dark when it comes to making decisions like, can you afford to hire a new employee? How should you price your work so it's profitable? Which projects should you bid on? And what should you avoid? Do you need financing? Do you need a line of credit? And then what does it take to secure financing? What are banks looking for? What are bonding companies looking for? Well, over the past several months, I've surveyed a few thousand construction business owners. I've interviewed a group of financial experts, and I've come up with 4 things you need to do to get the financial side of your house in order. These are what I call the 4 steps to financial freedom for a construction business. Here we go. Step number 1 is to set up a precision bookkeeping system, right? While coaching and training construction business owners over the past few years, I've come up with 4 situations that a lot of my clients find themselves stuck in, mired in one of these 4 situations when it comes to their bookkeeping system. You might be stuck in one, but look, you have to get unstuck and overcome each of these situations if you want to get where you want to be. So here is situation number 1 that a lot of people are stuck in. 0 systems. There are no financial systems. Running the business out of a checkbook, maybe even mixing personal and business expenses, commingled personal and business expenses, bad idea. They're trying to make business decisions based on a bank account balance, not looking at accounts receivable, not looking at accounts payable, just like what's in the bank account right now. Not even balancing the checkbook, literally looking at the bank balance online maybe. They know how important it is to get the financial side of the business set up properly, but it's just maybe they got started, they didn't realize how important. Maybe they didn't realize how important it was to get the financial side set up, to get the bookkeeping side set up. They just said, we got to get started. We're going to start selling some work, doing jobs, and we'll figure this stuff out later. But now it becomes overwhelming, and they don't know where to start. The result, those folks have zero financial information. They don't have any financial information. Can't make decisions because they don't have any information. Situation number 2 is what I would call they hoped software would take care of it. They signed up for an accounting software like QuickBooks or Xero or something else, and they hoped that technology would compensate for a lack of bookkeeping expertise. They signed up, started paying, then they opened up the software to find that it is completely empty, completely blank screen. No chart of accounts, no processes to follow, no workflows, nothing. A lot of folks tried their best to get it set up, but they didn't know how to do it. They got overwhelmed, got behind, got busy doing other stuff, and they just abandoned it. The end result is they have maybe some information, maybe. In many cases, they don't have any information, but they don't have accurate financial reports that they can rely on. They don't have information that they can give to their CPA at tax time. And then as a result of these first 2 situations, in many cases, they're just not filing tax returns. And then they have the stress that comes with being concerned about the IRS and back taxes, and they have that weighing on them. Those are bad situations. Situation number 3 is they have information but no insights. Information but no insights. And many of these folks have a bookkeeper and probably have a CPA that are doing their finances, but they don't feel like they can make business decisions based on the information that they're getting. Maybe it's a friend or a family member or a spouse who's doing the bookkeeping, and they're doing the best they can, but they're not a bookkeeper, and they don't understand how to set up a bookkeeping system and how to run it. And in many cases, these folks aren't sure how competent their bookkeeper is, and they're not sure if they're doing it correctly. Maybe they have some financial information, but they don't know what it means. Or they don't have the confidence that it's right, and they can't make decisions based on the information. They can't predict cash flow. They can't pull the trigger on a hire because they don't have the confidence in that information. And as a result, those folks have some information, but they're not able to make confident decisions with it. And then situation number 4 is trying to figure out everything yourself. One common problem is thinking that you can and that you have to do everything by yourself. So maybe you read blog posts, you watch YouTube videos, you join Facebook groups, try to piece together this system from various sources, this jigsaw puzzle type bookkeeping system. But the reality is that will only take you so far. You really need more. You need direction from experts who specialize in financials, and more specifically, they specialize in construction finance, construction bookkeeping, construction accounting. So which of those situations sounds familiar? Do you fall into any of those 4 situations? Number 1, zero systems. Number 2, hoped software would solve it. Number 3, information but no insights. Or number 4, you're just trying to do it all yourself. So when I surveyed folks, there were several frequently asked questions, FAQs, when it came to bookkeeping setup, and I'm curious, listen to these questions and ask yourself, are these questions that resonate with you? So here's some of the frequently asked questions about setting up a precision bookkeeping system. What's the best way of going about implementing a job costing system? What level of detail is required to be effective in job costing? How much detail is too much detail? Is there a chart of accounts that's available that I can just use instead of trying to figure out my own? How do I set up my books so I can get good financial reports? So what about you? Which of those is your biggest question? Or when it comes to bookkeeping, what is your biggest question? What's the thing that's holding you back? All right, so step number 1 to financial freedom is to set up a precision bookkeeping system Step number 2 is to price your work for profit. Step number 2 is to price your work for profit. What I've found is that there are a couple of common misconceptions and, one big misconception and then several mistakes when it comes to pricing work for profit. Here's the misconception. A lot of contractors think they're not profitable because of what's going on in the field, but in reality, the field crews had no chance of being profitable because the project was a loss before they even mobilized to the site. Now, there are several root causes behind this, 3 root causes behind this. Number 1 is connected to overhead and indirect costs. The overhead and indirect costs aren't tracked properly, then the correct amount isn't included in the bid. Talking about overhead and indirect costs, these include things like office costs, rent, vehicles, insurance, fuel, marketing, advertising, legal, accounting, travel, paying yourself. There are a lot of people who don't account for paying themselves in their bid. The other root cause is not understanding the difference between markup and margin. This is a big deal, and if you don't understand the difference between markup and margin, it's going to cause some big problems for you. And the other root cause that is behind unprofitable work and projects that had no chance of being profitable from the beginning is bad data. No tracking or inaccurate cost tracking. So imagine this. You're pricing work based on some assumptions. You're doing the work. It's not profitable, and you just keep pricing the work the same way, getting the same results over and over because it's just based on bad data. Sort of like if you were cutting rafters, for example, and if your template is wrong and you go and cut an entire roof full of rafters based on the wrong template, you just keep doing it over and over, it's not going to work out. It's kind of the same way. When you price your work, you got to make sure that your template that you're pricing includes the right overhead and indirect costs. Otherwise, your job logs or your job reports might look profitable, but you don't have money in the bank account. So here are some of the frequently asked questions about pricing your work for profit from a bunch of other construction business owners. How do I determine what our overhead is for bidding purposes? Great question. How do I figure out how much to charge? A lot of people just use some percentage, 35%. They just add 35%. A lot of those folks don't understand the difference between markup and margin. What's the best way of tracking job costs to better the estimating process? How do I understand if the business is profitable? And then if not, where are we losing money? Where's the bleeding? I talk a lot about profit bleeds, and it's important to know where you're bleeding profit if the business is not profitable. Here's a big one. I hear this a lot. Quote, I'm doing well on my jobs, but I'm losing money. Where's the problem? My job P&L reports show that I'm making money, but I'm losing money. Where's the disconnect? What's the problem? Another question is, how do I create a project budget so I have something to manage to? This is a missing step. There's a bid, and then there's an actual, and there's no connection. There's no budget to manage to, no budget to execute against. How do I set that budget up? Here's a statement, quote, I feel the money just comes into my bank account and goes out even faster. There doesn't seem to be much left over, and I really don't understand why. Does that sound familiar? Well, if you have plenty of work and not enough money in the bank, this is where you need to look. Are you pricing your work for profit? Wouldn't it be a shame? It is a shame. It's a tragedy to be here. We are in the middle of 2021. Housing is booming. The construction industry is strong. And it's a tragedy to have plenty of work and then spend all of this money, take all of this risk, buying materials, equipment, paying all your overhead costs, paying for labor, doing all of this work, and then not have anything to show for it. You got to make sure and price your work for profit. Okay, step number 3 is to have and be able to understand your financial reports. You have to be able to understand your financial reports. That's step number 3 to financial freedom. There are several root cause problems behind this that a lot of contractors are dealing with. Number 1, there is no financial reporting. As one finance expert said, quote, "If you don't have regular and accurate financial statements, you're driving your business 100 miles an hour down a one-way street the wrong way at night in the fog without lights." So if you have no financial reporting, then you are flying your airplane blind. And this is unfortunately where a lot of construction businesses fall. Problem number 2 is useless reports. Maybe you're getting reports, but they're just wrong. You know they're wrong. Or you don't have confidence in the numbers. Or you're getting really accurate reports, but you're receiving them so late that they're meaningless. They're 100% rear view mirror. If you're getting your financial statements 60 days after the fact, it might be interesting historical data, but you can't make decisions with it. So those reports are useless, either because you're getting the information so late that you can't do anything with it, or the information's just wrong and you can't make decisions based on bad data. Or number 3 is you just don't know what the reports mean. Maybe you're getting reports, the information looks good, the information is accurate, but you don't know what to look at. You don't have the equivalent of a financial dashboard. You just don't know what to look at. You don't know what ratios to look at. You don't know what the numbers mean. Those are 3 problems when it comes to financial reports. Warren Buffett is quoted as saying, "You have to understand accounting. It's the language of business." You may think of yourself as a builder or an electrician or a steel erector or a concrete guy, or you may think of yourself as a contractor, but you have to be an accountant. You have to understand accounting. It's the language of business. And Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, said this: "The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight." Information is not all that valuable. What you really need are insights. That's what you can make decisions based on. So when I surveyed you folks, a lot of you, and a group of thousands of construction business owners, here are some of the frequently asked questions about financial reports. How do I analyze my balance sheet in a quick way to determine the financial condition of my business? What is the story telling me? What is it telling me? How do we know we're managing our finances correctly? How do we know? What can we look at to tell us that we're managing our finances correctly? A general question: how can I use my financial reporting as a tool to help guide decisions like, when should I hire? When should I invest? What should I do? What can I do to avoid big tax bills on tax day? How do I know when I can afford to hire someone or make that big investment? What are some metrics that we can benchmark our performance against? Some questions that people have are we as profitable as everybody else? Are we making 2% net profits when everybody else in our business is making 12? What are some financial metrics that we can benchmark our performance against? So which of those questions sound familiar to you, or which of those situations? Maybe it's no financial reporting, useless reports, or just not knowing what the reports mean. Step number 4 to financial freedom. So just to recap, step 1 is set up a precision bookkeeping system. Step 2 is price your work for profit. Step number 3 is to understand your financial reports, to receive and be able to understand your financial reports. And then step number 4 is to maximize your cash flow. Remember those symptoms that I shared at the very beginning of this podcast? Chest pain, increased heart rate, sweating, trembling, nausea. Look, I felt them all right? Especially after a few specific situations, including getting a phone call from Heather, my bookkeeper, saying, Todd, we're not going to be able to make payroll if we don't get some checks in the door. Me thinking, what's going to happen if those checks don't clear? Looking at the caller ID on my phone, knowing it's my banker calling, and knowing he doesn't have good news for me. Getting another situation that caused those symptoms, getting calls, or in some cases, visits from subcontractors and suppliers about past due accounts and not having any money to give them and not having a good answer for them. The reality is some of the worst days that I've ever had in business in my life have been a result of cash flow problems. So do any of those situations sound familiar to you? Have you ever had that tightness in your chest, increased heart rate, hands shaking, nausea, this upset stomach, maybe the sudden urge to go take a nap, this fight or flight response, the fear and anxiety? That's what it is. It's a fear response. And man, in my personal experience, very few things cause anxiety like cash flow. Sometimes the thought of opening up my laptop and looking at the bank account balance caused anxiety, right? So if any of those situations sound familiar to you, you're not alone, all right? Managing cash flow is, in my experience, the single biggest source of stress and anxiety for construction business owners, period. Here's what a few experts would tell you when it comes to cash flow. Peter Drucker, the great management guru, said, entrepreneurs believe that profit is what matters most in a new enterprise. So if you're planning to start a business, or if you are new in business, listen up. Peter Drucker says, entrepreneurs believe that profit is what matters most in a new enterprise, but profit is secondary. Cash flow matters the most. Richard Branson of Virgin Airlines and lots of other businesses said, quote, never take your eyes off the cash flow because it's the lifeblood of a business, end quote. And Jack Welch, former GE CEO, said this. This is interesting. He said, if I had to run a company on 3 measures, so if there were 3 things on his dashboard, those measures would be, number 1, customer satisfaction, number 2, employee satisfaction, and number 3, cash flow. Here's what I found about cash flow. There is one gigantic misconception about cash flow, and the misconception is that it's a problem. The big misconception is that cash flow is a problem. The reality is it's a symptom of several other underlying root causes. Now, I don't have time to uncover and dig into all of those here. I do a deep dive on cash flow root causes in the Construction Financial Masterclass that I'll tell you about in a minute, and I'm going to give you a tool that'll help you with cash flow in just a few minutes. But here are just a couple of the root causes that are behind bad cash flow, which is a symptom. So number 1, opportunity cost. I've talked about this before. I don't have time to go into it on here. Opportunity cost is a big root cause behind cash flow issues. Impossible pricing, right? We talked about that. If you don't price your work for profit, you will automatically go into a cash flow crunch mode. What I call invoicing gymnastics. If you're dealing with invoice hoops that you have to jump through to get paid, especially on the commercial side, invoice gymnastics can be a problem. And if your accounts receivable to accounts payable, your AR/AP ratio is jacked up, it's going to result in cash flow problems. So again, there are several other root causes that I go into and cover what they are, and also I uncover what they are, and then I cover how to solve them in a masterclass that I'll tell you about in a few minutes. But if you want to solve your cash flow, one of the best things you can do is to start thinking differently about it. And that the way to start thinking differently about it is to start driving your cash flow. Get in the driver's seat of your cash flow instead of just being along for the ride and then getting punched in the face when cash flow gets tight. That's how it feels, right? When you just get punched in the face and you find out, oh shit, we've got a problem. And you don't have time to respond. And then what happens when you find out you're in cash flow crunch mode? Your planning gets really short term. You get all of those symptoms that I talk about. You get tunnel vision. You physically can't think strategically in that mode. And everything, your world gets really small. And then that sets off a whole other domino effect of problems. So if you want to solve your cash flow problems, then you need to drive it. You need to get in the driver's seat. And there's a tool that I developed that my coaching clients use every month to drive their cash flow. It's called the Project Execution Plan. The Project Execution Plan. And if you would like a copy and you'd like to learn how to use it, then you can go to buildermasterclass.com/drive. buildermasterclass.com/drive. The project execution plan is just a little sliver of what I call the revenue maximizer tool that is part of the Construction Financial Masterclass. And frankly, I've developed a lot of tools in the years that I've been doing this, but the revenue maximizer tool is the single best tool I've ever put together. And here's what a few people have said about the revenue maximizer. Jerry McDaniel said, "The revenue maximizer changed my way of thinking about how to achieve my desired revenue goals." Sean Hawk said, "Love the revenue maximizer. I keep returning to it. Good stuff. Thank you." Thomas said, "I am hooked on the revenue maximizer." He sent me a text at like 6 o'clock on a Friday that said, "I'm hooked on the revenue maximizer." Erica Thompson said, "Right to left thinking that I learned in the revenue maximizer allows me to clearly define my goals, which gives me an outline to building the systems to get me there." So again, if you want to get your hands on the project execution plan, go to buildermasterclass.com/drive. And I mentioned the Construction Financial Masterclass. So speaking of that, if you're ready to have confidence in the financial side of your construction business, even if you've never looked at a balance sheet and you want to do that without hiring more staff, or you want to, if you're ready to use your financial statements to steer the ship of your business, even if you've never looked at a balance sheet and you have no idea where to start, and if you are ready to get to the root causes and solve your cash flow problems for good, then the Construction Financial Masterclass that I put together could be a good fit for you. Enrollment is open for a limited time. You can get all of the details at buildermasterclass.com/CFO. That's buildermasterclass.com/CFO. And so to recap what we talked about here, there are 4 steps to financial freedom. Step 1, set up your precision bookkeeping system. Get out of those situations that I talked about. Number 2, price your work for profit. Number 3, get your hands on and understand your financial statements. And then number 4, maximize your cash flow. So I want you to picture that for a moment. Picture this situation. Imagine knowing what your bank account will look like 3 months out with confidence, that knowing with some level of confidence what your bank account will look like 3 months out, maybe even 6 months out. Imagine opening up your financial reports every month, getting them quickly, getting them accurately, having confidence that the information's right, and then knowing exactly what to do with that information. What if you could set goals for your business? What if you could set goals for your personal income and then know exactly how to achieve them, have a plan, and then to know exactly how you're tracking toward those goals? Imagine what it would be like to have a profitable business, that has solid financial data you can make decisions with. You can feel like you have a clear windshield in front of you instead of flying your plane in the dark. Well, that's what I want you to think about that for a minute. Knowing what your bank account's going to look like, having good information you can make confident decisions, knowing when you can hire, when you should invest, being profitable, not having to worry about your cash flow, maybe even looking forward to opening up your laptop and looking at your bank account. What would that feel like? And then what would that do for you? What would be the ripple effects of that? How would that affect your time at home with your family? How would that affect your employees? How would that affect the way you interact with customers? What would that do for your stress level? Well, all of those things are exactly what the Construction Financial Masterclass was designed to do for you. You can get all of the details on the Construction Financial Masterclass over at buildermasterclass.com/CFO. Also, be sure to get your project execution plan and watch the video on how to use it so you can drive your cash flow over at buildermasterclass.com/drive. So the Construction Financial Masterclass is open for enrollment for a short time. So check that out, buildermasterclass.com/CFO. You can get all of the details, get all of the pricing, and find out what is in it for you at buildermasterclass.com/CFO. And if you have questions about that, you'll be able to get in touch with me there as well. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this helps. My name is Todd DeWalt. See you next time.